It's not easy to be a micro brand. For some reason, we expect them to push out watches that live up to standards that reviews on YouTube possibly created in the first place. They have to look impeccable under a macro lens, they have to be at least as accurate as any other established brand, and God help them if there's a minute blemish on the dial or an uneven indice under extreme loupe. What's even more annoying for these passionate and seemingly across the board lovely people is that if there was just another logo on the dial and the backing of, for instance, the Swatch Group, you would have the marketing power of a giant behind you and the network of distributors that will help you sell your wares at a sometimes highly inflated price simply due to the name slapped on the dial. Today I've got a new piece from a Danish microbrand called Nordic Marine Instruments. And I can tell you that the temptation is there to put the rose-colored glasses on simply due to the fact that I love Copenhagen, and I've spent plenty of my formative years in Denmark having grown up in southern Sweden. But I wouldn't do you or myself any favors if I didn't bring you an honest and balanced review. One concern I have immediately is the price, and I'm going to rip the band-aid off on that one. The retail cost for the three variants, limited to 99 each, is set at $1,299 but the pre-order phase from 1 November to 31 January will bring it down to $999 and a further discount of $150 if you sign up to the newsletter. So okay, let's call it $849. That is still 1,300 Australian dollars. And there are a lot of other watches I would consider both new and second-hand at that price. So is it worth the asking price? Let's find out. If you're new to my channel, thank you for being here, and I would be ever so grateful if you hit that like and subscribe button. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back, you legend. For many of us, we'll rule out a watch immediately if it's not sized according to our requirements, so let's start there. I measured a watch at 40.5mm across and 48mm lug to lug. Lug width is 20mm and we're looking at a 13mm thickness. So far so good then. These are all measurements that work on most wrists. Let's check out the dial next. This dial will come in three colors, being white, black and blue. This black one is made to absorb light and upon very close inspection has tiny specks of dark grey mixed in with the black. It does indeed absorb light and lifts the rest of the details on the dial. The logo is printed just under the 12 and that's the only print you'll find on this dial. I like this, and this is a sign of a microbrand watch. No marketing department here that forces you to shout about the water resistance, which is 20 ATM by the way. The indices are very sharp, particularly impressive around the small second circle above the 6, but if I had to nitpick, there are plenty of traces of residue where the lume has been glued onto the steel indice. At least that's what I think it is. The hands are quite interesting. They are multifaceted on the base and sides with a matte brush top. This would not be easy to achieve, and I can see the inspiration from a certain Japanese brand with the initials GS. To be extremely nitpicky here, there are a couple of rough edges on the pointy end of each hand, but you'd have to get extremely close to see these, and this is a prototype as well. I've always liked small seconds complications, and this one is implemented well. There is a calendar complication at the 3 position, which is a color matched white on black. So despite being quite small, you can just make out the date in a little bit of light. If you're like me and prefer your watches without dates, it's unobtrusive enough not to bother us. The bezel is what's known as a bund type of bezel, which is something I've learned thanks to Mick behind the brand. Unlike traditional dive time bezels, used to time an event up to 60 minutes, bund bezels were specifically designed to keep track of elapsed hours during long underwater military operations. The brushed ceramic bezel insert therefore only shows an inverted triangle. The black polishing technique, labeled mørk, which literally means dark, is claimed to be done entirely by hand and requires the application of gradual pressure for different lengths of time on the surface to be polished against the diamond paste. The result is mirror-like polished surfaces that look black at certain angles. To be honest, if this was not explained to me, I probably wouldn't have given it a second look, and I still might not. But one thing I will say is that fingerprints do not show up at all. It lines up well, and whilst the action is a little rough, it feels solid enough with no backplay. The case is very attractive in my opinion. It reminds me a little of the Seiko SPB cases, which can only be a good thing. There are distinct bevels from tip to tip, both on the upper side and underneath, so there are no sharp edges anywhere on this case. The lugs are quite long, and the transition to the crown guards is subtle and protects the crown well without being hard to grip. The crown is reverse engraved with the logo, which has no rough edges. Okay, so far so good then. It's only now where I feel we might drift into troubled waters. There are two aspects of the bracelet I really don't like. But firstly, it's very attractive with alternate matte and polished surfaces, and all individual links that should look good even after some wear. They can be adjusted fairly easily, despite having absolutely minute screws. But none of these things are my issue. It's the wear and the buckle that I feel I have to moan about. The watch sits flat on my wrist, and on both sides there's this weird step down. The effect it has is that only the two small mid-links transition the bracelet down to my wrist, and I can't say I like the look. To me, a bracelet should flow from the watch case in one smooth motion, and at least on my wrist, it does not. The buckle does not fit this bracelet design at all, in my opinion. It's way too blocky for such a delicate and lovely design. It's exactly the same as the one used on most Helsing bracelets, and if you worn any of those, you know that they are brutal to say the least. Sure, it has a diver's extension and all that, but in my opinion, this needs a new approach. My final complaint is the back of the watch, where the reversed engraving is way too rough feeling, and that's on balance with a case that's so smooth and beautiful. Now I do appreciate this sounds a bit like, oh poor little baby with an adult man's skin that wouldn't even feel this. But this is more similar to what you'd find on the back of a Helm Vanuatu, but that's a watch that's sold at 1/3 of the price, and it's quite acceptable then. This is a prototype, so let's hope that this part is quite literally smoothed out. Behind the screw back sits the Swiss Sellita SW261-1 movement, which you can typically expect a power reserve of around 41 hours from. So now to the Lume. It's definitely the strongest on the hands and Lume pip on the bezel, which is the correct approach in my opinion. The beveled indices do also reflect well in low light, so it's a good effort all around. So here we are, another micro brand that's being judged harshly perhaps for a couple small missteps, but don't get me wrong, the overall effort here is very good. It's an attractive and reasonably unique design with some fun elements such as the bezel and that lovely case design. The problem is, as usual, competition. Asking for, in a best case scenario, $850 puts you in both Duranzo, Christopher Ward, RZE and second hour territory. And you're also up against some very good Seiko and Tissot options. This means that you're competing on being a cool micro brand from Denmark with a well-made watch at limited quantities. Is that enough? I certainly hope so, and my fingers and toes are crossed for Mick and Nordic Marine Instruments to find their audience for this Nordhavn model, and many more to come. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.